just blown away by how many people are interested and willing to come out and hear me talk today. I'm really excited to be here, and I hope that I'm able to share some information today that you might find useful for yourself, or even to share with your family members, your loved ones, your community members as well. So thank you, I suppose, to start off with. I would like to first acknowledge my gratitude to be an uninvited visitor to these traditional territories here, and I'd also like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the country in which I live, work and play on back home in Australia. So this is where I live here. John mentioned I live in Brisbane, which is the capital city of our state, Queensland. But Australia, yeah.
Please could you move the mic just slightly closer to your mouth?
Sure. Is that better?
Yes.
And so my city of Brisbane is the capital city of the state Queensland, but you can see from this map here that we consider Australia a country of many nations. These are all of the First Nations of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work on. The artwork up here was done by a traditional owner of the land on which our University of Queensland is situated on, and I just wanted to show you what the purple means, and it's our jacaranda trees which come into bloom every October throughout our university campus, and it just lights up the whole university and even the whole city in this beautiful purple. So if you're ever lucky enough to come and visit us in Queensland, October is a beautiful time to come. And I suppose some declarations just to say that I have no financial interest in any nutrition companies or anything like that. So this is my own advice based on the research and my practice. Before I get started, I would also like to, I suppose, pay homage to some of the older people in my life, these loved ones that I'm feeling very far away from at the moment. And you can see here my grandma and my grandfather, and my mother-in-law and father-in-law. They hold my family together and have held my family together. And you can see that we love to eat. So these are all celebratory events. This is a Mother's Day morning tea with my grandmother and my mother and my sister. This is my father-in-law's 80th birthday a couple of years ago. Our birthday present to him was this seafood feast. That was the only gift he wanted. And he made a good dent into that food, I must say. And this is my mother-in-law Judy's birthday dinner. My granddad here, he has passed, but he was such a lover of food, and right up until the very ends of his life he loved food. And I think it was something that, despite being 96 when he died, he really remained fairly strong and capable despite his dementia, and I think his love of food, particularly cream buns and ice creams, I think really gave him those calories to keep him going. So anyway, this is a little insight into my family and our love of food. So I'm not a dietitian, he'll be up here. I'm not a strict Puritan dietitian, and in fact I haven't met many of those. We love food, that's why we're in this profession, and so please don't feel like I'll be telling you to stop eating your favourite foods. I think it's about nourishing our body through our nutrients, but also nourishing our soul and having beautiful interactions with our food as well. So today I'll be talking about healthy eating as we age, and I love to see such a diversity in the ages in the audience here today, because I don't think it's ever too early to start thinking about our healthy eating and thinking about how we can promote that healthy aging, but also it's never too late as well to be improving your nutrition. And so I'll be talking today a little bit about how nutrition can help us with preventing and slowing the progression of frailty and disease, how it's so important in maintaining our muscle health and our function. Talk a little bit about managing nutrition risk and malnutrition, and a bit about eating when we are sick. And I suppose just thinking about how as we age, we might go through these different stages of our health and frailty, times where we're feeling quite robust and able to really concentrate on healthy eating and optimising our nutrition, and other times that's a lot harder to do when we might be sick, and so some ways in which we can really be boosting our nutrition to promote our recovery. And so I think I've said this here, but I think we can't underestimate the role that nutrition can play in preventing and slowing the progression of frailty. And that's why it is that one of the key parts of the Canadian Frailty Network's Avoid program, with the D being so integral here to slowing the progression of frailty. We know from research that has been done around the world that there is no one optimal healthy eating pattern, but there are some which have been shown to be linked with better health outcomes. So you might hear about the Mediterranean diet, for example, or some of the traditional sort of Japanese diets, and some of the diets of some of the traditional owners of different country. But what these all seem to have in common is an abundance of fruit and vegetables in season, lots of nuts and legumes and those plant-based proteins, as well as a variety of other protein sources. They tend to be lower in red meat than perhaps our traditional Western diets, with a wide variety of proteins from fish, from dairy, from eggs. Plant oils, so thinking about things like olive oils, and also eating with others. So some of that social aspect of these eating patterns has also been shown to be important, as well as activity. And so I haven't talked about that here, but that's also another part of things like the Mediterranean diet pattern, where we're walking and moving a lot. So these are some things that we could really be thinking about including in our everyday diet to really be promoting this healthy ageing and preventing chronic disease. And in fact, the Canada's Food Guide really does follow these same principles. So I don't know if you've seen this. This is and it's very similar to the Australians' guide to healthy eating. But you can see here, if you were to take all of the food that you were to eat, perhaps over a week, we wouldn't expect every meal to look as balanced and as well proportioned as this. But if you were to take the food that you ate over a whole week and were to put it together on a plate, we'd like to see half of that food to be from our fruits and vegetables, from a variety of sources. You can see here lots of different colours, and each of those colours are different vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and things that I don't even think we've really discovered the full potential of are in those colours in the fruits and vegetables. The natural ones, of course, not the ones we add into our processed food. You can see that about a quarter of this plate is are our protein foods, and you can see here this real variety of different protein foods here. We've got nuts, we've got legumes, we've got red meats, fish, eggs, and then we've got about a quarter which are our whole grain foods that are high in carbohydrates. And so together, these are really what makes a healthy diet. You can see here that there are also some other points I've just put in the green section there. Be mindful of your eating habits, cook more often, enjoy your food and eat meals with others. And these are also part of the Canada's Food Guide. And I think this really speaks to that enjoyment and social aspect of the food, of eating. The cooking more often, I think, is a nod to the fact that often the food that we prepare in our homes is lower in salt and lower in those additives and less processed than the foods that we might be eating that are pre-prepared, but we can talk a little bit about that later. And I think being mindful, so particularly as we're younger and we're busy, it's very easy to kind of just eat through the food to move on to the next thing. And I think really sitting with your food, enjoying it, being mindful of how you're eating is another way to promote really good health, I think, for your mental health as much as your nutritional health. So you can see that a quarter of that plate was dedicated to proteins, and proteins are one of the essential building blocks of life. So we've got essential amino acids, so they're parts of our proteins that are needed for the body. Our body can't make those, we need to get them from our diet. And I've listed a big list of all of the different roles that proteins have in our body, and proteins become really important as we get older. So I think some of the key things here, I think, as we get older, so they're required for our muscle health. Our muscles are made up of proteins. Our body's constantly breaking down and making new proteins, and so we need to be giving our body this constant source of these essential amino acids to support that process. It helps our stress response and our body when we're having an infection. So these proteins are really important to support a good recovery from illness. And you can see right at the bottom, it's a source of energy for our body. So it gives us calories, just like carbohydrates and fats do. But that's the very last thing we want our proteins to be doing. We want a good amount of protein to be doing all these other things, and then our carbohydrates and our fat in our diet are really what should be giving our body that energy. So as we get older, we actually need more protein than when we're younger. And so we see a lot of young people having protein drinks and worrying about all of this, but actually it's as we get older that we need more protein. And this is because our body has a slightly lower capacity to be building these proteins. So as I mentioned, our body's constantly breaking down and building proteins. It's just a bit slower as we get older. And so this means we need more protein to support that process. So I'm sorry, there's a little bit of maths involved in this section. But I suppose if you were wanting to work out, am I having enough protein and how much protein would my body need? We know that as we get older, we need at least 1 gram of protein for every kilogram that we weigh. And so that's our daily amount. So I've put here as an example, if you're 80 kilograms, it would be about 80 grams of protein each day. This is a really general guide. So this is, nutrition is not, it's not possible to stand up here and tell you exactly what every individual person needs, but this is a rough guide. So about 1 gram for every kilogram you weigh. Ideally, it might be a little bit more than that. And so I've just put here, it might be 1.2 to 1.5 grams. That makes the maths a little bit more complicated. But I suppose as a minimum, that one, a little bit more, particularly if you're unwell or if you're really trying to boost your muscle strength or muscle mass, or if you're sick. That's really where you might want to be adding a little bit more protein into your diet. There might be some situations where you might need to be careful with your protein intake, and so I'd be talking to your doctor if you've got severe kidney disease, for example. That would be a time where I'd talk to your doctor about your individual circumstance. But generally, we know that these proteins are very healthy and safe for the body. So to try to make it a little bit easier, I've developed a handout, which if you haven't got, you could grab on your way out as well, which sort of gives a bit of a guide. Don't hold me to it because it's not going to be precise for every single situation, but it's a rough guide where I've just given you an indication of what amount of food you might eat to get 10 grams of protein, because I thought that might be an easy way to think about it. If you were this person who was 80 kilos, you might need 8 serves of protein in the day. And so you can take that guide away and have a bit of a look and a think about it, and think about how much protein your body might need and how many serves of protein that might be, and sort of match that up against what you think you might be eating. The food labels, the nutrition facts on all of your food labels will always say how many grams of protein are in every item. And hopefully by looking at the weight, for example, if you buy a pack of meat, for example, you'll know how much that weighs, and then you'll be able to work out how many protein serves are in that and work out how much you're eating from that. So I hope that's helpful. It's not exhaustive and it's not precise, but it might just give you a little bit of a start with your protein intake. So these are some of the sources of protein. So you can see, and I've tried to put it on the screen, but also in your handout, that the proteins that the body seems to that they seem to be most, we call it bioavailable, or sort of the easiest for the body to use. They're most aligned with the amino acid profile that we need. So these are our animal foods, and then I've sort of moved it down from there for things that you might that are less bioavailable. So you could, if you follow mostly a vegetarian eating pattern, there's lots of benefits to that, and I'm not saying that you don't, that's not a good thing, but you may just need to be having slightly more proteins to get the amounts of amino acids that you need. But we would recommend a mix of all of these sorts of foods in a healthy diet. I was thinking about something back to it. So, as I mentioned before, the D part of avoid is the diet, and John spoke us through all of these here before. I just wanted to point out that diet and healthy eating is often combined with a lot of these other parts of the frailty management. So we've got activity, and so we're talking about moving your body. We're talking about, if you can, actually doing some exercise to be building your muscle mass and your strength. So here we're talking about maybe some weights or some body weight exercises if you're able, and if that's what you've your doctor's happy for you to be doing in a supervised way. We know that is really what helps to stimulate your body to be making those muscles and improving your muscle health. And so that's a really important part. I think the other important part with the diet is the interaction bit, which I've talked about. And actually we've developed a program in Australia that we call Eat, Walk, Engage. And so that's a program that we really promote in our hospitals, and it's been shown to really benefit older people. We know that people develop less delirium, they go home quicker, they need they don't need care home or rehabilitation care like they do. So those three things are really important, and they go so nicely together. So thinking about how you can be combining them. So I've spoken a lot about eating when you're in good health and to build your muscle health and to be preventing frailty. But we know that as we get older, our nutrition risk can increase. And so by nutrition risk, I mean not getting enough of the right kind of nutrition. And we know from research that 1 in 3 older Canadians are at nutrition risk. It's similar in Australia, it's similar across the world really. And we know that if we're not getting the right kinds of nutrition and we're at nutrition risk, it can really increase our risk of these kinds of things here. And so I suppose it's important to know if you are at nutrition risk, and then we can put in place a plan to really help with that. A Canadian research group here, as part of the Canadian Malnutrition Task Force, has developed this nutrition risk screening tool, which I've provided on the back of the handout. And you can take that home and have a bit of a think about. Might be something to discuss with your family members, others in your life. That could be a way, if you're worried about someone else's nutrition, you might be able to talk with them about it. And it looks at these 8 different aspects of our nutrition and gives a score. I'm sorry, the writing is very small on the page. It was to try to fit it onto one page, so I'm sorry about that. But I'll talk through it really quickly here. But these are some things, I suppose, almost like little red flags, that maybe your nutrition is at risk and that it might be something to work on yourself, with your family, with your healthcare providers, to be improving your nutrition. So one of the questions is, has your weight changed in the past 6 months? And it gives you a score based on whether you've lost weight or gained weight, and you get a higher score depending on how much weight you may have lost or gained. And so the problem with weight loss, and as I was talking to one of the ladies in the front here, weight loss is not always a good thing, and in fact as we get older it's a big red flag for me as a dietitian. Often when we're losing weight, it's muscle that we're losing. So even though, as a younger person, when we're worried about that kind of thing, we might think that's a positive thing. As we get older, it's our muscle that we tend to lose. It can be a sign of malnutrition in our body, it can be a sign of disease, and it increases our frailty. There's also a problem with weight gain as we get older. It can be a sign of disease, so it could be fluid weight, especially if you gained weight in a fairly quick, in a short time period. If your weight goes up a few kilos in a couple of days, then you'd be worried about that. And if you're gaining too much weight above what your body is designed to carry, it can provide a lot of stress on the body. And I'm talking about probably more physical stress in terms of your knees and your back and your ankles and things like that. I suppose as we get older, we worry less about having just a little bit of extra padding on the body. I know when we're younger, we worry a little bit about that extra weight because it can increase our risk of heart disease and diabetes. And so if you're in your younger years, then definitely maintaining what is a healthy body weight and size for you. But as we get older, we're much less worried about that, and we actually know that losing weight or being underweight is actually worse for our overall health than having a little bit of extra weight. Lots and lots of extra weight can be bad for our body, so I'd be talking to your doctor about how you might manage that. But I think the main thing with weight, it's a really tricky topic, but what I'd be recommending is maintaining a stable weight if you can when you're older. Forget about the extreme weight loss diets. They're going to strip muscle off your body. I think if you're worried that you're carrying extra weight, then I'd talk to a sensitive and caring health professional about that and whether that's something you should be worried about or not. And I'd definitely talk to your doctor if you're losing weight. So this is the first aspect of that nutrition risk tool. The next one is, do you skip meals? And so we have the same or even increased nutrient requirements in older age. I talked about protein. We need more protein. We also need a little bit more calcium. And in fact, because we need, I suppose, a slightly less overall food, because we're not moving around and running around like we were when we were younger, actually the nutrients in our food become even more important. So when we skip meals, that can lead to that muscle loss because we might not be getting enough of the overall calories, so our body starts to use our muscle as fuel, and it can lead to malnutrition. So skipping meals is something that we definitely don't recommend. And so if this is something that as you're going through this screening tool, you think, oh yeah, I have been skipping meals a little bit more, I think really thinking about what might be causing you to skip meals and putting a bit of a plan in place there. So thinking about, could you build in some snacks? If you can't eat at a certain time of the day anymore, can you be looking at adding in food or nutritious drinks in other ways? Maybe it's about some ready-made meals. I mentioned before, cooking for yourself is always best, but we know that's not always practical or possible. And so if that isn't, then ready-made meals are excellent, and I would highly recommend that for you if preparing meals for yourself has become a chore. Cooking in bulk, so maybe it's about cooking lots and having them in the freezer or the fridge, so that you're not having to go through that activity every time. Routines and reminders, so thinking about your food a little bit like medicine, and we always plan out when we're having our medications in the day, so maybe thinking about setting a timer or reminder, especially if our memories are becoming a little bit hazy and we lose track of time or what time of the day is it. And sometimes nutritional supplements can be helpful here if you're skipping meals because of a low appetite or a lack of interest in our food. So there's lots of different drinks available in the pharmacies. I've been scoping them out while I'm here, and there's full aisles of these drinks. It's good to talk to your health professional to work out what might be best for you. Some of these can provide the full suite of nutrients that your body needs, and people can in fact live on these drinks, that they provide all the nutrients that we know the body needs. But they're a great boost as well if you're finding that having your full meals is not possible anymore. So the next question is about appetite. And we know that a reduction in appetite is really common and is in fact is normal as we get older. We know that our hormones change in our body, so those signals from our stomach and our brain to tell us that we're hungry, that lunch is coming up, they just don't fire like they do when we're younger. We're also not moving around as much, and so that is a stimulant of appetite. And overall, our calorie requirements are reduced, and so we don't have that drive for hunger. But as I said, eating is just as important or more important as we're older. So I think if a poor appetite is something that you reflect on and you think, yeah, I'm not as hungry as I used to be, I'm not eating as much as I used to, then I just popped a few things here that you could be thinking about. So this is really common when you're sick, and in hospital we've actually are moving more to having 6 small meals in the day rather than 3 big meals, because you just get full so quickly that you can't eat a full meal anymore. Those nutritious drinks like smoothies and milkshakes, and using some of those nutrition powders and blitzing up all the good fruits and vegetables and things that you couldn't possibly sit and eat in a full plate, having those in a drink, and maybe having those instead of a coffee or a tea once a day would then mean that you're still having the same amount, but you're having those nutritious drinks instead. So that's what I mean by swapping out low-calorie foods and drinks. So if you tend to have a cup of tea and a biscuit for a morning tea snack, maybe then having a nutritious drink and then having maybe some cheese or a cream bun, my granddad would have certainly had, having something like that instead. And so you might be having a similar volume of food, but there's more calories in that. I mentioned the nutrition supplements before, and I think really talking to your doctor about this, because a low appetite can be a signal that there might be something else going on in the body, a disease or an infection brewing. It might be a medication as well. We know that they can impact on your appetite, so talking to your doctor or your pharmacist about that if you notice it's a sudden change and there's been other changes in your overall health. The next question is about problems with swallowing, so coughing, choking or having pain when you swallow your food and fluid. I'm not an expert in swallowing, but I've learned from my colleagues who are that there are so many nerves and muscles involved in chewing and swallowing, and they can be affected by a range of conditions, so strokes, dementias, those sorts of things, anything that affects our nerves and even our muscles. So if we've got overall losing muscle in our body, we can be losing some of these muscles in our throat and in our jaw, and that can make us feel really tired when we're chewing and swallowing. So if you are having trouble with this, we know it can affect the type of food that is eaten and the amount, and so that's why this is a question in this screen. So I'd always see your doctor. I've always said that for all of these, haven't I? Soft or mashed foods, and I suppose really being conscious of maybe some of those protein foods that are softer or can be mashed. So I'm thinking about eggs are a great one, baked beans, adding lentils or beans into soups, adding lots of those high calorie things into those foods as well. So this is a time where you can get some extra cream or butter or things like that into your diet. Having a drink with each of your swallow and having slightly thicker drinks can also be a bit easier to swallow if you find that that's a problem. But make sure you talk to somebody, because it's something that probably needs to be looked at and someone to keep a bit of an eye on for you. There's a question here about how many pieces or serves of fruits and vegetables are you having in the day, and as I mentioned before in the Canada's Food Guide, that's half of the plate. And so recognising that our fruits and vegetables are important for our fibre, so important for our gut health and keeping our bowels moving, also carbohydrates, fluids, and all of those, like I said, all of those colours are giving us our micronutrients and antioxidants. The important thing here is to have a variety of types and colours, and fresh, frozen, canned, a range of different types of fruits and vegetables is fine, and they've shown that frozen vegetables still retain, because they're frozen so quickly, still retain those nutrients in there. So whatever you prefer and can afford and like to have, then that's what I'd be recommending there. And so I think if you're having trouble eating a lot of these fruits and vegetables, then trying to sneak them in, I suppose, like we do with our kids. I think starting to think a little bit about, grating them into things, adding them on the side. And I think thinking about vegetables for breakfast as well can be a nice one. So some eggs with some mushrooms or tomatoes or something, spinach or something at breakfast can be a way to sneak them in. When you're unwell though, I wouldn't worry so much about the fruits and vegetables. It's the protein and the calories that I'm most worried about. So in hospital, I have lots of people sort of say, oh, I'm not eating my fruits and vegetables. It's the one time you can forget what your mother said, and you can leave them aside for now. But when you're healthy and well, fruits and vegetables are very, very important. We've got how much fluid do you drink in a day? It's really tricky with fluid because everybody's requirements are very different, and it does depend on how big you are, how active you are, the climate. So I know back home in summer, our fluid requirements are really high, and so lots of people come into trouble with dehydration. So aiming for about 6 to 8 cups per day, more if you're bigger and more active, maybe around the 6 end if you're smaller and less active. But all types of fluid count, so it doesn't need to be water. Water is the best drink, but if you're needing to sneak in extra calories and protein, then having any sort of fluids, those nutritious drinks are important, and liquid foods also provide your body with fluid. I think if you're having trouble with your fluid, I find the best thing is thinking about your routines and reminders and setting goals and targets for yourself around, I'll have a drink with each meal, I'll have a drink every couple of hours, I've got to get through this jug by the end of the day, or those sorts of things can be helpful reminders. It's something that's really easy to forget. Do you eat one or more meals a day with someone? And so this question in the screen is picking up on that social side of things, and we know that when we eat with others, we do tend to eat a little bit more. We might tend to eat something a little bit more nutritious than when we're at home on our own, and just slapping together something easy to get the job done. So that's why this question is in here, and it ties back, of course, to our avoid frailty message. And then the last question here is picking up on meal preparation. And so I'd ask some questions about how you're feeling about preparing meals for yourself. Do you still enjoy this, or is this a chore? Or if you don't cook meals for yourself, do you still enjoy the foods and meals that are prepared by others? And I suppose we know that if we find it a chore, if we're not enjoying the meals, then our intake is reduced. And so I think if you think that this is really affecting your food intake, then coming up with some strategies, probably with others in your life, about how you can really be making sure that you're able to prepare and enjoy your meals at home. So you can use that tool as just even a little bit of a check-in for yourself around how well do I think I'm going? Is there something there that I could be doing to start to reduce my nutrition risk and improve my nutrition? You can score it. I've put the little numbers on there, they're tiny. You probably need to get a microscope or someone to help you read them. But you can add those up. And so the score of 38 is or less might be a sign that there's some improvement needed. And it might be something then that you might want to see your doctor or seek out a dietitian to help you with. I think I've said that there. I think the one thing you could also be doing is keeping a bit of an eye on your weight at home. Like I said before, trying to maintain your weight. So I'm not talking about weight as worried about carrying a few extra kilograms. I think it's an easy way at home to think about, am I losing muscle, am I losing weight, and just keep checking in with your own energy levels and your strength. And if you're noticing that they're a bit lower than normal, that also might be give you a reason to think about your nutrition. And am I doing as well with my nutrition as I was before? Of course, I'd recommend you could see a dietitian, and everybody's eating patterns and preferences and individual requirements and responses to foods are different. And so it's really hard for me to be up here saying that these are the exact foods or ways of eating. So seeing a dietitian can really help you to come up with a plan. And so I understand you can find a dietitian through your primary healthcare provider, some of the home care teams and things like that as well. Just to finish up with, I wanted to talk a little bit about nutrition when you're sick or if you are malnourished. And nutrition really does change a little bit there. I've talked a bit about this as we've gone through, but even higher protein. So this is all much harder to do when you're sick and malnourished because you don't want to eat, you're feeling awful, but your body actually demands more nutrition at that time. And so I think really seeing a dietitian at that time, if you're in hospital, is can be really helpful. So you need more protein than usual, probably 50% more than that 1 gram per kilogram per day. This is when the fats and sugars come into its own. So anything you're wanting to eat with fats and sugars when you're sick or malnourished, I would be giving a thumbs up to. I put donuts there, but anything there, the ice creams, we provide all those sorts of things to people in hospital if their calorie intake is low, because we know otherwise their body's just going to chew through their muscle. The small regular meals I mentioned before, nutritious drinks, so this is where we tend to use a lot of those nutrition supplements because some people are only able, we know it's really common to eat less than half of the meals in hospital and it's just not enough to recover. When you're sick or malnourished, this is the time to talk to your doctors about whether you need to continue to follow dietary restrictions that you might have been given in the past. So we know that in our younger years, we might have been told by the doctors to avoid high-fat foods or follow a low-salt diet or don't eat these sorts of foods. When you're sick or malnourished, that may no longer be needed, and it might really be more about eating whatever foods and drinks you can to support your energy and protein intake. So I'd always just ask them, do I still need to worry about this for now? And then you can have a personalised plan for you through a dietitian as well. So in finishing up, I suppose I hope that I've been able to share a little bit of information with you today about healthy eating, particularly about protein to maintain your muscle health. And I'd encourage you to have a bit of a think about your protein intake through the day. You can use that guide to have a bit of a think about how much protein you're eating, and is it nicely spread out throughout the day. It's important to monitor and reduce our nutrition risks, so going through some of those questions and thinking about, are there any areas that I could maybe be doing a little bit better? And for us really to think about food as medicine, particularly if we're sick or malnourished, and to really prioritise that nutrition as a key part of our recovery. And so just to finish, I've just popped on here, so food may be essential for the body, but good food is fuel for the soul. And so I think really making sure we never forget that enjoyment piece of it as much as we can. So thank you so much. I'd welcome any questions that people might have.